On today's show, an update on Trae Young finally, and I do mean finally, arrived on Saturday evening. It is not the worst case scenario, nor is it the absolute best, but we'll get into how it impacts the Hawks, how it impacts Trae, the timeline, and much more, and it's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2092 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday evening into Sunday here at the beginning of November. And I want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out. Subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. I appreciate you being here. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe. And importantly, I would say, tell your friends about this show. I will also say at the top of this episode, this is an emergency podcast on some level. Now, it's one that we were able to prepare for a little bit because if you've been under a rock the last few days, Trae Young left Wednesday's game for the Hawks with what they called a right knee sprain in the immediate aftermath of that. There was no formal update, which was a bit odd to be sure. And it finally arrived after the Hawks played another whole game in Indiana, the NBA Cup opener on Friday. Saturday night was when the word started to trickle out. First report came from Shams Charania of ESPN. I was able to confirm it shortly after that, and then the Hawks finally announced their actual update. First, before I dive into what actually transpired here, I will always plug the show. I did an episode after the game Wednesday. I did an extra episode on Thursday evening with Tony East of Locked On Pacers, and then I did a full breakdown of the game on Friday night. A nice win for the Hawks on the road in the NBA Cup opener. But obviously, the shadow of Trae's injury has been cast over the last 3 days, basically, in Hawks land. And after some, I know I talked about this a little bit last night on the show, but there was some consternation about when the MRI actually took place for Trae Young. Again, he got hurt on Wednesday, but there were some travel issues that I reported on last night, talked about on the show. He did not have the MRI until Friday. That was part of the announcement that the Hawks made, confirming that there was a delay, which kind of explains at least some of the delay in the announcement. MRI Friday, results announced on Saturday is a relatively normal timeline. The difference is that you normally wouldn't wait till Friday to have the MRI. So I'm not sure what happened there in between. That contributed, I'm sure, to the delay. But more importantly than all of that, the diagnosis is that the MRI confirmed a right knee MCL sprain. And what the Hawks said, no additional structural damage to the right knee. Young has begun rehab already, according to the Hawks, and he'll be reevaluated in approximately 4 weeks. Now, it's been kind of a meme already, but reevaluation does not mean return. I know it's a bit that I do, but it's also because it's true. The Hawks are one of the organizations in the league that does not give projected return dates. They only give projected reevaluation timelines, mostly to get people to stop asking them until the next deadline actually arrives on the reevaluation. But I've already seen people misaggregating this about how Trae will return in 4 weeks. That's not what they said. Now, could he return in 4 weeks? Sure, absolutely he could. But that's not what the announcement was, that reevaluation is in 4 weeks. And that means they check on him again and then see what happens at that point in time. On very, very, very occasionally, a guy will come back like on or before that date. But usually it's a safe projection, again, not a guarantee, but a projection to be a little bit after the reevaluation date for a player to return from a longer-term injury. Also, I've been doing some investigation. Jeff Stotts is I would say the leading NBA injury chronicler. He has this massive database that's really, really useful for, comparing. It's not gospel. He does averages on what guys miss. And it's because he has so much data, it becomes pretty accurate as far as projections are concerned. Now, the Hawks did not announce what grade of MCL sprain. Basically, there's grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. We could probably be pretty sure it's not a grade 1 sprain because in Jeff's database, it's more like a 3-week return timeline on grade 1 sprains. So I would guess, again, I'm not reporting that, but I would guess that based on the evaluation timeline, it's probably not a grade 1. Grade 2 is what it seems to be, in my opinion, if I had to project right now, and then grade 3. So grade 2 MCL sprains, again, according to In Street Clothes, which is Jeff Stott's site, grade 2 carries an average time lost of roughly 6 weeks before you actually return to the court in the NBA, return to a game. Again, that's an average. And on average, that's like 20-ish games during a season. Now, schedules can be a little bit different in the NBA, but that's a 20-ish game, 6 weeks-ish return timeline for grade 2. Grade 3 is more like a 2-month to 10-week kind of return timeline. But I will say the announcement of no additional structural damage is part of why I'm pointing to my projection being grade 2 on this. I'm not a doctor. I'm just interpreting what's been out there in the past. It's reported by experts beyond me. But regardless, 4 weeks is 4 weeks. Now, one more time, reevaluation is not return. If you do the math on 4 weeks from today, which is Saturday, November 1st, it's pretty easy because you're 4 weeks from the 1st. That's the 29th of November. Essentially, he would miss all but if he came back exactly at 4 weeks, which again, I'm not saying he's going to, but even if you take I would say the best case scenario realistically of exactly 4 weeks, he would miss 14 games. 15 if you include the game on Wednesday. So the game on Friday. 14 more games, so 15 total. That would include all of the remaining NBA Cup group stage, by the way. The Hawks are 1-0, which I discussed at length last night on the show. But the other 3 games he'd be out for those. If it's a 6 weeks return, which is, again, more closer to the average for grade 2, you would add in at least 5 more regular season games. And then you get into the NBA Cup period where if the Hawks were to make the quarterfinals, that would be in that period, for example. If you don't make the quarterfinals, you get assigned 2 more games to fill out your schedule. So somewhere, if it's a 6-week timeline, you're figuring somewhere between 20 to 22 games. That's, a quarter of the season, roughly. And that's a long time. And one reason I'm bringing that up is just to illustrate how long 4 to 6 weeks is. It may not seem like it's that bad because, again, for me, this is not a bad scenario for Trae Young. If you said, is this the worst case scenario? Absolutely not. I know that the Hawks, Quinn Snyder came out and said they were not worried about ACL damage. That's good, but there was some meniscus concern that I was hearing about, not necessarily from the Hawks, but just like from videos and people, all that stuff. Regardless, so this is not the best case, but it isn't the worst case either. So that's a positive thing. But Trae Young has been remarkably durable in his career, especially when you factor in how small he is. But even putting that to the side, Trae's missed games by season, and this includes everything from taking a day off on a back-to-back to games that didn't matter at the end of the season, any of that. He has missed 1 game, then 7 games, then 9 games, 6 games, 9 games, 28 games, the one time he actually got hurt before this for a long period of time, and last year he missed 6 games. So he's been, again, very, very durable. Before this injury, the Hawks had played 554 games in the regular season since Trae was drafted, including the first 5 of this season before the injury. Trae had played 488 of those games, or roughly 88% of those games. He averages well over 70 games per season. That's not a given in today's NBA, especially for a small guard. So when it is, and that's why it's a little bit strange that Trae has pretty much always been available other than one fluke injury. Just as a reminder, if you're a new Hawks fan, or if you might have forgotten this, his only extended absence, literally the only time he's been out for a long period of time, he missed 23 games in a row when he tore a ligament in his 5th finger of his left hand in the 23-24 season. And then, of course, he came back earlier than expected at that point, wore a big brace on his hand, and tried to play when he probably shouldn't have, to be honest, because the Hawks needed him to try to make the playoffs at that point in time. But that's basically it. Like, he's not been out. Like, yeah, last year he was not his bursty self. He had the Achilles tendonitis. He was on the injury report a lot, but he hasn't missed extended time. This is only the second time in his entire career that's happened to him. So and also, this one was also kind of a freak injury. If you watch it, it only happened because Mo Gay didn't know he would be falling over backwards, and Trae never saw him, or he would have been able to slide out of the way. So it happens. Injuries do happen, but it's one of those things. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of this. Obviously, we'll get into in a second how the Hawks are going to handle what happens now. We saw a preview of that on Friday. It's one game against a subpar opponent, but one game that we at least see now, like 6 quarters basically of the non-Trae Young experience for the healthy Hawks. But beyond that, I would say this is not a bad scenario. Obviously, it's not ideal. You don't want to have Trae Young out. I saw some, let's just say crazy, overstated takes after Friday night's game about how the Hawks were better without Trae Young and, all that stuff. It's not, that's for another day. I don't want to litigate that right now. I think it's pretty obviously silly to suggest that they're just better taking him off the roster and not replacing him. If you want to argue that maybe if you want to think that they should build around somebody else in the future, that's a more nuanced discussion you can have. But what I won't entertain is just like, they're not better without him, just taking him off and not doing anything else. That's very silly. Regardless, he was going to be out for a while. It's going to be a long-term injury. It's not the season. That's on the bright side. but it's going to be probably a quarter of the season, and the Hawks have to kind of navigate that. In a second, I'll talk about how they're going to do that, what the options might be as far as if they want to add somebody on the market, etc. And we'll get into all of that and more in just one moment. Your ambition just met its match. With Robinhood, you play for the win, not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money, trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of your new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself? Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Basketball is officially here, and nothing beats like actually being in the arena for the opening games, really any game of the NBA season. Let's be real though, ticket buying can be a total headache sometimes between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that actually jump up before you're actually checking out at the end of the process. It's easy to get frustrated sometimes. All you want to do is cheer on your favorite team in person, but that is where Game Time comes in. It's the app that gives you, the fan, the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets, fast, easy, and stress-free. I used Game Time in the past, actually recently, to look for some seats for my family friends. And I have to say, it couldn't have been any simpler or easier. I found great seats for them in just minutes. At Game Time, I love that what you see is what you're going to pay with no hidden fees at checkout. Plus, you can actually see exactly what you're going to actually have as a view inside the venue before you actually buy the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. Their zone deals are also a game changer as well. Pick the section yourself, and the Game Time will actually pick the seats for you, and you can save big money. You can find NBA tickets for as little as $25 or less. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets right now with the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, the code is LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA at Game Time for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, we're back with the emergency podcast style reaction here. Not quite as many nuanced takeaways as I might have normally because we're still processing this in real time. But obviously the big question that I've been getting in my mentions in the last couple of minutes, hours, etc., is basically how the Hawks are going to handle this. And one thing I will say on the positive side, first and foremost, I want to stress the Hawks are better suited to handle a Trae Young absence right now than they would have been for the vast majority of the last 7 seasons. The only time that they've been set up similarly well to weather the storm on offense without Trae was when they had DeJounte Murray, and the numbers bear that out. You know, the Hawks have always been, and I do mean always been, a below-average offense without Trae Young on the court in his entire career. The only time they were competitive offensively, and I stress that, competitive offensively during the Trae Young era was when DeJounte was around to operate the offense, because obviously he was an overqualified backup point guard. But the rest of the time, the Hawks have been basically brutal offensively when Trae's been off the court in his career. The problem with DeJounte, by the way, was that they couldn't work together on the court. But right now, having Nickeil Alexander-Walker, having Dyson Daniels, having Luke Kennard, having, Keaton is on a lower level offensively, but also having, importantly, 2 legitimate front court offensive shot creators in Jalen Johnson, who can handle the ball as well, and then also Porzingis, who attracts attention from defenses, and basically also having no one on the roster, other than maybe N'Faly Dante, that really has to be totally set up on offense. I love Clint Capella, famously, but Clint was kind of reliant on someone like Trae to set him up. Now you're playing guys, at least the guys who are playing minutes for them, Okongwu, Porzingis, even Mo Gay is probably the most dependent player offensively for the Hawks, but they don't have anybody that just has to be paired to Trae to have any success on offense at all. All of that thrown in, they have more of a prayer of being at least respectable offensively. I have the numbers here, again, for reference, in the 5 seasons of Trae's career that did not involve DeJounte as the backup point guard, the Hawks' offensive rating with Trae off the court has never been higher than 107 in any of those seasons without DeJounte, or this season, which is a small sample size. So if you're thinking I'm overstating it, I promise you I'm not. 107 is essentially like a league worst level, and that's where the Hawks have been every year or worse with Trae off the court. So it's been a repeated problem. Hawks fans for a long time will definitely know that, but that's what they're dealing with. On the bright side, again, what I just said, they're better suited up to overcome this time around. That's a positive. at the same time, the big thing is, yes, they have offensive capability. There is a pathway for the first time, again, other than when DeJounte was around, for the Hawks to actually keep it up offensively to a respectable level. I would not over-index on the Indiana game, but there were some good signs in that game. The fact that they were able to attack the rim repeatedly. I think the Pacers, in their current form, with 6 guys injured or whatever it was, are a pretty bad basketball team. But the Hawks took advantage of that, which is not a small thing. You have to be able to do that in the NBA. It's a long season. You got to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. And that was an encouraging sign. Plus, the light came on in that game after about 6-7 minutes to just attack the rim. And they are well suited to do that. Dyson, his best characteristic on offense is to attack the rim. Jalen Johnson attacks the rim. Even Nikhil has been very aggressive and effective attacking the rim so far. That's a positive. Now, do they have the passing that they had without Trae Young? No, they don't. Trae Young is the best passing guard in the league, in my opinion. At the very worst, he's in the top 3. So that's a big loss. They have nobody that can pass like that. But there are ways to attack the rim and be a fully functional, more egalitarian for sure, offensive team. What really, though, is important is that they basically, to be what they want to be without Trae Young on the court and without Trae Young available for 15, 20, whatever the number is, they have to defend. That seems obvious, and it should seem obvious, but they absolutely have to defend at a high level. And look, let's be honest. The Hawks have been, for as bad as they've been offensively with Trae off the court in his entire career, they are usually, not always, but usually better defensively with him off the floor, which is obvious. He's not a good defender. I think that his defensive impact in a negative direction is often overstated, but we can be adults. Trae's a bad defender, and that's not a big secret. He's small, all those things. So there is a pathway for the Hawks to be really good. Even in the preseason, if you listen to the show in the summer or on some of the visits I did on other podcasts, Nate Duncan show, etc., when it came up, like, hey, what happens if Trae's off the court, or what happens if Trae rolls an ankle or whatever, I would always say, look, if you take Trae off this roster, there's a pathway for the Hawks to be like really good defensively, because basically now you're only playing one guy, and that's Luke Kennard, who is like definitely a below average defender. Yeah, maybe if you're throwing Veet out there some, which, by the way, Veet didn't play at all on Friday. Veet would be the other guy who I think is a below average defender. And Ricochet is not a great defender at this point in time, but there are not a lot of holes. Like, people even nationally like kind of salivate over some of those bench units. If you can play Dyson Daniels and Nikhil Alexander-Walker together in the backcourt with 2 of Jalen, Porzingis, Okongwu in the front court, or Mo Gay, and then Ricochet at the 3 or whatever, there's a lot of defensive upside with that group. Now, importantly, though, the problem has always been, and I do mean always, basically, has been over 7+ years, is that the offensive drop-off has been considerably larger than the improvement has been defensively, which does make sense. Like, Trae Young is a top 25, 30 player in the league. Like, you don't just like snap your fingers and replace that guy. And that was a theme last night. Nikhil Alexander-Walker talked about it after the game. So did Jalen. Like, you have to not think about, as a player even, and they said this, it's not about replacing Trae. It's about doing what you can do and operating with yourself, but also being aggressive and taking on a little bit of a larger role and defending all those things, like checking those boxes. And that first game was an encouraging sign on all of that. So that's the nuts and bolts of it all. I have to say, like, they do have, it's funny, early in his career, if you're a new listener or if you're just following the Hawks for the last couple seasons, maybe, the thought was that I was too low on Trae. It was always funny that I was like not quite enthusiastic enough, because look, he has weaknesses, and that's the reality. And at one point he was like in top 10 player discussions, and I always thought that was a little bit aggressive, honestly. And that's flipped to where I'm often accused now of being too high on Trae, and that's fine. My opinion of Trae has largely been the same. Like, he's really, really, really good offensively. Point guard defense is overrated. He's not good there, but it is what it is. And, he's been their best player for his entire career. He's been their best player. With that said, I also believe wholeheartedly that this team can be solid without Trae Young. Again, I think it's preposterous to believe that they're like better without him, just taking him off the team. But that is not mutually, like, it's not the same thing. Like, there's nuance here, and I'm big on nuance and context, but they can be a pretty good basketball team without Trae Young for a month. That could definitely happen. Crucially, and knock on wood if you're a Hawks fan, right now it's the only injury they have. Where things really start to spiral a little bit more, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but if you get more injuries while Trae is also out, that can be magnified. The current roster without Trae is not a 50-win roster, I don't think, but it's a competitive like playoff level team, like at least play-in level team. And if they can play 500 basketball or even, hopefully even higher than that, if you're a Hawks fan, without him for a while, that would be really, really impressive. And this is the first time in a long time I've actually thought the Hawks are pretty good set up to like be competitive and be in a decent position. So I know I've said that a number of times, but I think it's important to kind of drill home. They're better set up. They'll still miss them on offense, but I think the pathway to the Hawks this season, even with Trae, the pathway to the team being what they're supposed to be, it was not always like in previous years. It was the polls of they had to be awesome on offense, like awesome, because you knew even in the best case scenario, they might be like 18th defensively. Coming into this year, I thought they had a chance to be a top 10, 12 team on both ends of the floor. And yeah, offensively, I don't see the Hawks being a top 10 offense in minutes without Trae Young. But defensively, they might be pretty darn good. So the balance there really helps. And I would just say the sky is not falling on this one. If he was out for the season, it's a different conversation. But can they weather a month? Absolutely. And I think that leaning into the defense would be important. And I think, generally speaking, we'll get into some of this in a second when I talk about the evaluation period, basically, that the Hawks are about to have. But they have talent. They have lineups they can use. And also, like, there is a chance they might bring somebody in, and that player might not play for them. But there's some stuff going on that we don't know all of it yet. We probably won't get like a firm indication of whether the Hawks might sign somebody for a day or two. But in the meantime, they can weather this. I would pass that kind of morale boosting thing along a little bit. Like, this is not how it might have been in previous seasons where it was like, man, I don't know how they're going to score. This isn't going to be that. They have more options than they've had in the past. And that is, again, why this offseason and the work that Auntie did this summer was so important to round out the roster with A, more shooting, B, more offensive creation with Nikhil and Porzingis and Kennard all being able to do a little bit of that, and also defensively and just bringing in depth and all those things. Depth really helps when you lose your best player, and the Hawks should be tested in that form over the next month, but I believe that it will be the test that they at least are capable of passing this time around. All right, more to come in a second when it comes to evaluations for the next couple of weeks and months, plus external options perhaps, and more after a word from our partners. Let's be real. Making excuses does not actually solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired, or it just happens to everyone sometimes. When it comes to performance, your body sometimes just needs a little bit of extra support, and that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiette makes it easy to get started as well. You can just connect with a board-certified doctor. It's 100% online with no awkward waiting rooms and no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment actually ships directly to you in discreet packaging straight to your door. And the process is fast, simple, and private. It's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter to you. Visit Rougiette, that's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNBA and get 15% off your first order. That's Rougiette.com/LockedOnNBA. And don't forget that code to use. It's LockedOnNBA, so they know that we sent you to them. Rougiette, stop making excuses and start making moves. All right, before we get out of here, some questions naturally that I'm getting about, like, will the Hawks sign someone? Can the Hawks sign someone? Can the Hawks trade for someone? The answer to that is definitely TBD overall. I mentioned this a little bit on Wednesday, but I do have to chuckle a little bit at like the miracle person that's like somehow available on November 1st. It's going to suddenly be awesome for the Hawks to sign in free agency. Free agency is a wasteland on November 1st for obvious reasons. If players are really good, they're already on a team. Now, there are some guys that I think are at least worth exploring as the Hawks. But look, I was saying on this show, I would have tried to sign a steady hand third, second point guard type in September, in August. I would have done that. Now, I didn't think it was like a glaring need. And I think believe in the multiple ball handler, backup point guard by committee model more than a lot of fans that I hear from do. And I get that it's not traditional. It's not a 6'1" guy handling the ball all the time. Like, Keaton Wallace is point guard size, but even then, Keaton Wallace is not more of a point guard than Alexander Walker is. It's just that he is more of that size. Regardless, there is a school of thought that I think is reasonable that you might want to bring in some insurance now if you need to have a situation where you get impressed or whatever, just another ball handler, steady hand. Here are the guys that, this is not a comprehensive list, but like Cameron Payne, DeLon Wright, Jaden Springer, Monty Morris, Elfrid Payton. Those are like the 5 guys with NBA experience that I could come up with that are at least are available right now. They all have varying things. Like Payne was the one that was in the biggest role last year. I love DeLon. DeLon's more of a defense first player, which is not really what you need. They have plenty of that with Nikhil, with Dyson, even with Keaton. But still, if I wouldn't bother if they signed Delon Wright at all. I think he's a good player. Peyton can't score efficiently. Springer's a defensive first player as well. Ben Simmons is like the non-traditional option. I don't know if that's even going to be on the table for the Hawks. I don't know if anything's on the table for the Hawks. Like, Auntie did not show any urgency to sign a guard during training camp. In fact, they traded one, Kobe Buffkin. And as a quick PSA, I've said it before, but just in case anybody's missed this, I'm still getting questions even today. The Hawks cannot sign Kobe Buffkin. They're not allowed to. There's a rule in the CBA. If you trade a player and they are waived, the only team that he can't sign with is the Hawks. So I don't know if the Hawks would want to, but they can't. Doesn't matter anyway. Strike it off the board. So it's not a sexy list. I mean, I'm not saying that it is. I'm not advocating for any of these guys individually. If you told me right now the Hawks could sign Cam Payne, I'd probably do it, to be honest with you. But also, that doesn't mean that I think the Cam Payne should play. Like I've been saying for 4 days now, that I would try to play bigger, not smaller, as the Hawks. I'd lean into my defense. And they did. And by the way, the Hawks did that a lot on Friday. If you missed it, like I would listen to the show last night, but Keaton Wallace played like his normal allotment in the situation, like 15-ish minutes in the game. Like that's what it should be. Everybody else on the court, I mean, Kennard kind of plays small, but they played bigger. It was more of Mo Gay. It was even a stint, and it was a short stint of Jalen at the 3, which they finally tried, and I would try, not as a primary look, but as a change-up look to look bigger. So I'd lean on that. Even if they sign Cam Payne, if they sign DeLon Wright, if they sign whoever, Elfrid Payton, that player doesn't have to play. Like it's just more of an insurance thing. So also Nikola Jurisic has been a question I've gotten. I don't think he's ready to play NBA basketball. And I think the Hawks have kind of shown that they think the same thing I do. He's been inactive for every game so far. He's been in G League practice. Like he's a long ways away. I get that too. So that's the external options. Yes, they can make a trade. The Hawks do have trade exceptions. The Hawks have an open roster spot, but trades are hard to make in November. They're hard to make anytime, but they're really hard to make in November. So yeah, maybe there is a paper over move that the Hawks could do in the short term. I've seen people arguing for whichever player. Like I get it, but unless I have intel about a trade, it's hard to project a trade on November 1st. It just is. And urgency level, we'll see. Like this is also in different front offices. I had a good feel for what Travis Schlenk might do at times, even Landry Fields at times. Auntie Soleil has been a lead executive for 6 months. We don't really know what he might do in season. This is the first time this has ever happened to him where he has to have this situation come up midseason. He's big on optionality. That's why the Hawks left the roster spot open. That's why they are where they are. That's why they traded Buffkin to save some money, all those things. Now you might use that, or you might look and evaluate the next few games and see what you have. Like, I think there's a school of thought that I think makes total sense to like, look, even beyond this season and learning about this season and all that focus is what most of this has been about. The future is the future. I think the Hawks, I've been saying, I project the Hawks to bring Trae Young back on a new deal after the season or during the season. But he's potentially going to be a free agent. Like he has a player option next season, but he could opt out. There is definitely like a rational thought process of like, hey, you get a month now to see what you're going to look like in a non-Trae Young world. And I already said this in the first segment, but you wouldn't just lose Trae with no ability to replace him at all. Like you're not going to get anybody that's like Trae Young for what the Hawks have in their toolbox, unless they win the lottery and can draft Darren Peterson. But there is it's possible. I think it's not like likely to happen, but it's certainly possible. And I think the theory of the case with this team is going to be interesting to monitor in the coming days. On a more micro level, you're talking about like, hey, these first few games, like they have an interesting test on Sunday against Cleveland. Now, Cleveland has a bunch of injuries. Donovan Mitchell missed the game on Friday. Darius Garland is out for sure. Jared Allen is questionable. Like you could see more of a zombie Cavs, but if the Cavs are at full strength, like that's a real test on the road. And it doesn't mean that anything that happens in that game will be indicative. Like I will always try to tell people like not to overreact in any direction to any single game. It's a long season, but coming up, the schedule is not super friendly. Like at Cleveland, home for Orlando, then Toronto, who already beat you soundly in your own building, then the Lakers, and Luka's back now. Then you go at Clippers. That's your next 5 games. None of those are easy. Like the easiest one on paper is Toronto at home, and we already saw what happened with Toronto at home in the first game of the season. So doesn't mean the Hawks can't go. They can go 4-1. I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Like that's what it is. But it is not going to be. There are no Indiana Pacers zombie edition on the schedule of the next 5 games. So we'll learn a little bit more than we learned in that game. But I do believe that there was some positive take from that game on Friday. They won it on the road. They showed up and took care of business. It is different though in fact, if you look at the history of the Hawks, when Trae's missed like a one-off game here and there, they've done pretty well. It's the well, at least relatively speaking, compared to expectations. It's that once you're, if he's going to be out for 2 weeks, if he's going to be out for, that's different. It's a different challenge because then teams can scout you, take things away, all those things. So we'll see how it goes, but it's not the best injury in the world, nor is it the worst. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to kind of follow what the Hawks do on both ends of the floor over the next couple of games. Obviously, you root for Trae to get back as fast as possible. He's a durable guy, and also he hates to miss games. Like Trae Young hates missing games, hates it. I had somebody ask me, like, isn't Trae the kind of guy who might like come back before the reevaluation period? I mean, yes, but also the Hawks don't have to let him. Like, there's a save always with some players. It's like save the player from themselves because Trae never wants to sit. He tried to stay in the game. I mean, I played the quote on Wednesday night on the show if anybody missed it. But Quinn mentioned like Trae wanted to stay in. Like he tried to stay in the game and just couldn't physically do it. And now we know why. You sprained your MCL and it's grade 2 probably. Yeah, you can't play on that. But yeah, we'll see. Long story short, they avoided the absolute disaster scenario, but it's going to be a very interesting month on the podcast, and we'll be locked in talking about all of it from now and really forever. We are, again, episode 2092, 2,000 plus episodes of this show. So if you're just finding us now, please lock in and subscribe. Very much appreciate that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on Twitter /X at Locked On Hawks. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and you can follow my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. From here, I'll be back with a new show after the game on Sunday. PSA, Hawks Cavs is a 6 p.m. Eastern time start on Sunday. So a little bit of an earlier show potentially after that. Stay tuned, subscribe to the show, and we'll see you all next time.